It's 1984. A Soviet column is pushing through the Panjshir Valley in Afghanistan. The Mujahideen hold the high ground, exactly where they always are. Rifle fire, RPGs, the usual. But this time, one vehicle in the column tilts its gun barrel almost straight up, 74 degrees into the air, and starts walking 30mm shells up the mountainside. That's not a tank. That's not an artillery piece. That's a personnel carrier. And that detail, an infantry vehicle that can engage targets almost directly overhead, is exactly what makes the BMP-2 one of the most consequential military vehicles of the 20th century. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why a Soviet autocannon designed in the 1970s is still showing up in active combat zones right now. To understand why the BMP-2 exists, you need to understand what it replaced and why that thing was a disaster in practice. The BMP-1 entered service in 1966. It looked terrifying on paper, fast, amphibious, armed with a 73mm gun. NATO panicked when they saw it. Here's the kicker: the gun was nearly useless. The 2A-28 Grom was a low-velocity smoothbore. At anything beyond 500 meters, accuracy dropped off a cliff. The gunner had to lob shells at targets rather than shoot at them. It had a slow, manual reload, and the Sagger anti-tank missile mounted alongside it required the operator to manually guide it to the target using a joystick while under fire for the full flight time of up to 25 seconds. Soviet doctrine quietly acknowledged that combat stress made this nearly impossible for most crews. Then came 1973. Egypt and Syria launched simultaneous attacks on Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Egyptian infantry with Sagger missiles on foot proved devastatingly effective in the opening days, destroying hundreds of Israeli tanks along the Suez Canal. But when Egypt committed its armored and mechanized forces, including BMP-1s, to push beyond their missile umbrella on October 14th, the results were catastrophic. Israeli forces destroyed over 250 Egyptian vehicles in a single day. The BMP-1's 73mm gun couldn't reliably penetrate Israeli armor at the ranges the battle was actually being fought. The Soviets watched all of this very carefully. They needed something that could engage light vehicles, infantry in the open, helicopters, and fortified positions, all from a moving platform at real combat ranges, with a crew that didn't need to be a sharpshooter to hit anything. The solution was the 2A-42, and the vehicle built around it became the BMP-2. In a minute, I'm going to show you exactly how the 2A-42's dual-feed system works and why it lets a gunner switch between two completely different ammunition types without touching a single round. But first, the gun itself. The 2A-42 is a 30mm autocannon, single barrel, gas-operated, and built with one specific goal: reliability above everything else. The Soviets had learned from their own history. Complex weapons fail. Cold, mud, sand, and stressed-out soldiers do not mix well with finicky mechanisms. So the 2A-42 was designed to be simple enough to keep working in the worst conditions imaginable. Muzzle velocity for armor-piercing rounds sits at around 970 meters per second. Effective range against ground targets is up to 2,000 meters. Against aerial targets, that stretches to 2,500 meters. But the number that tells you everything about this cannon is the elevation range, -5 degrees to +74 degrees. Most armored vehicle guns max out around 30 to 35 degrees of elevation. The BMP-2 can point its gun almost straight up. That single design choice transformed the vehicle's entire tactical role. It wasn't just a ground combat platform anymore. It could suppress hilltop positions, engage low-flying helicopters, and clear urban buildings floor by floor. In Afghanistan, that mattered enormously. The Mujahideen operated from ridgelines and elevated terrain that BMP-1s and tanks simply could not reach with their guns. The BMP-2 changed that equation overnight. Here's what makes this insane. The 2A-42 doesn't just carry one type of ammunition, it carries two, simultaneously loaded, and the gunner can switch between them with a single switch. No reloading, no swapping magazines, just flip the selector and you're firing a completely different round. The standard loadout gives you armor-piercing discarding sabot rounds in one feed and high-explosive incendiary rounds in the other. Spot an armored vehicle? Switch to AP, infantry in the open. Switch to HE, helicopter closing in at low altitude, the gun's already elevated. Pick your round and fire. The BMP-2 carries 500 rounds total. 160 are ready to fire immediately in the dual-feed system. The remaining 340 are stowed for reloading. Now do the math. The 2A-42 has two rate-of-fire settings. Low rate is around 200 to 300 rounds per minute. High rate pushes up to 550 rounds per minute. At high rate, you can empty your ready rounds in under 18 seconds. That is not a typo. This is why Soviet doctrine treated the BMP-2 as an ambush weapon. Short, devastating bursts. Overwhelm the target before they can respond. Then reposition. Coming up, I'll show you what happened when BMP-2s faced Western infantry fighting vehicles in combat. One side had the better-trained crews. The other had the gun that could shoot higher. The result wasn't decided by the hardware. The BMP-2 entered service officially in 1980. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan had begun in December 1979. By the early 1980s, BMP-2s were being pushed into the theater as the Soviets realized the BMP-1 was being neutralized by terrain alone. Here's what that actually looked like in practice. A Soviet column enters a mountain pass. Standard formation. The ridgelines on both sides are 60, 70, 80 degrees above the vehicles. RPG teams and riflemen have perfect downward angles. The BMP-1 can't elevate its gun far enough to engage them. The column has to stop, dismount infantry, and clear the high ground on foot every single time. The BMP-2 broke that pattern. Its 74-degree elevation meant the vehicle could suppress ridgeline positions without stopping the column. The high explosive rounds fragmenting against rock faces created enough suppression to allow movement even when they didn't score direct hits. Tactical reports from the Afghan conflict, later declassified and analyzed by the Frunze Military Academy, specifically cited the 2A-42's high-angle capability as operationally decisive in mountain engagements. The BMP-1 had turned every mountain pass into a potential kill zone. The BMP-2 gave Soviet commanders a way to fight through them. The vehicle still had real problems. Its armor was light, and RPG-7s remained a serious threat at close range. Mines and culvert bombs could stop a BMP-2 just as easily as anything else. But as a fire support platform in terrain that made every other vehicle in the Soviet inventory look obsolete, it did exactly what it was designed to do. Iraq operated BMP-2s and used them during the Gulf War in 1991. Here's where the story gets uncomfortable for anyone who wants simple conclusions. Iraqi BMP-2s came up against American M2 Bradleys, which carry a 25mm autocannon, the M242 Bushmaster. In several confirmed engagements, Bradleys destroyed Iraqi BMP-2s at ranges beyond 1,500 meters. On paper, those vehicles are closely matched. The 2A-42 actually has a longer effective range than the Bushmaster. So what happened? Iraqi crews were holding static positions. Moving predictably, not using elevation, not using the dual feed system to switch rapidly between targets. They were operating a suppression and ambush weapon like a fixed defensive gun. The irony is sharp. The BMP-2 was specifically designed to punish exactly the kind of static, predictable movement that Iraqi forces were using against them. So here's the question this raises. If the BMP-2's effectiveness depends this much on doctrine, why did over 35 countries choose to buy or build it? The answer involves something the West didn't fully account for until it was too late. Estimates put total BMP-2 production across all variants at somewhere above 15,000 vehicles. They've been operated by more than 35 countries. That number tells you something. This isn't just a Soviet bloc vehicle. India license produces them. Finland operated them. Algeria, Angola, Azerbaijan, Afghanistan, Armenia, and that's just the A's. The reason comes down to one thing. The 2A-42 filled a gap that most armies hadn't figured out they had. Before vehicles like the BMP-2 and the Bradley, standard thinking was that infantry carriers carried infantry and tanks handled fire support. The idea of a vehicle that could do both, carry troops and provide sustained, accurate, high-angle fire support simultaneously, was new enough that most doctrines hadn't caught up. The BMP-2 forced that rethink globally. Here's a detail most people miss. The 2A-42 cannon isn't only in the BMP-2. The exact same gun is mounted on the Ka-50 Black Shark attack helicopter. The Soviets valued ammunition and maintenance commonality so highly that they put a ground vehicle cannon on one of their primary attack helicopters. One gun, two completely different platforms, one ammunition supply chain in the field. Whether that's brilliant logistics or ideological stubbornness dressed up as engineering, you can decide. The BMP-2 has appeared in Ukraine, Syria, Libya, Nagorno-Karabakh, and multiple African theaters in the 2000s alone. In Ukraine specifically, both Russian and Ukrainian forces have operated BMP-2s. The vehicle's light armor is being punished by modern anti-tank missiles, loitering munitions, and first-person view drones. Losses on both sides have been significant and documented. But here's what's striking. Neither side has stopped using them. Because here's what nothing cheap does as well. The 2A-42 can engage low-flying drones. It can suppress fortified positions with high explosive rounds. It can move infantry under fire and immediately provide covering fire the moment they dismount. No MRAP, no standard APC. Nothing in that price and logistics bracket does all of that. The BMP-3, designed as its replacement, is more capable in certain respects and far more expensive to operate and maintain. Many operators have kept BMP-2s running alongside the newer platform rather than replacing it outright. As military analyst Lester Grau wrote in his study of Soviet tactics in Afghanistan, the BMP series redefined what mechanized infantry was expected to accomplish on the battlefield. The BMP-2 is what that redefinition looks like in steel. A 1970s infantry carrier, still killing things in 2024. Not because armies can't afford something better, because nothing else cheap enough to field at scale does exactly what the 2A-42 does, point 74 degrees into the sky, switch ammunition types in a fraction of a second, and put 550 rounds per minute into whatever problem needs solving. That's the real legacy of the BMP-2. Not that it was perfect, it wasn't. But it asked a question that nobody had thought to ask before. What if the vehicle that carries your soldiers can also reach the enemy? Your tanks can't. Quick question for the comments. BMP-2 or Bradley? Which would you rather be in? Drop your answer below. See you in the next one.